In this lesson, we are going to be looking at HTML layout. How do we lay the elements or HTML elements on our page? And what HTML layout is how elements are displayed on the page. An HTML layout is a blueprint used to arrange web pages in a well-defined manner. So you may not just want to place elements anyhow on the page. You want to do it in a well planned out, well-defined, and well-arranged manner, making it easy to navigate, easy to understand, and uh, and this uses HTML tags to customize web design elements. So we're going to look at that. So and this is how an example of it. You have sections, your header, nav, section, aside, footers, and stuff. And this helps you to plan out your web page and it helps uh, users on your page to understand and easily eyeball what they are looking for and the information that they need. So we'll look at how we are gonna display these items next. But before we delve into that, just let me describe what each of these mean. The header defines uh, defines a header for a document or a section. So whatever your headers want to be, wherever you have to put it in the header section. And then we have the nav section, which define a set of navigation links, right? So you're going to have maybe your home, maybe your help, all that. That should be in that section. And then you have a section here, which defines a section in your document. So just a simple section that you want to define and put stuff in there. The article defines, and that's independent, and it's just self-contained content. So you can put an independent self-contained content in here. And then you have your aside, which defines content aside from the actual content, like a sidebar or something like that. So that's your aside. And then you have your footer, which defines the footer for a document or a section, right? So this is just a little bit of an explanation, and we are going to look into it when we code next. So just to emphasize, there are four different general techniques that we can use to create multi-column layouts. And each of these have their own like pros and cons, and it depends. It's a user preference, right? You can decide which one you want to use. So I'm just gonna go through them. The first one is the CSS framework. We have some frameworks that you can use to create uh, your layout. You can use Bootstrap, which is by far the most common, and we are gonna dedicate a whole uh, maybe a new training for that, right? But you can use the CSS framework like Bootstrap, which is generally gonna it's gonna be fast. You just have to use it because it's already been designed for you, and you just have to know what to use, how to use it, and it's a really fast way to go about it. The second part or the second type is your CSS float property, right? Or your CSS float layout, right? So with the CSS float property, what we what you can see is it's everything floats, right? And the way to describe it is the entire web layouts floats uses the float property, right? So you would learn you would need to learn to remember how the float and the clear property works, and it's easy to learn, but we are gonna dedicate a more detailed section in the CSS section of this course. So I'm just gonna just brush over it. But the disadvantages is that floating the elements are tied to the document floor, right? Which may harm the flexibility. So it's not really that flexible, but if you really know how to use it, it should be good to go. So we are going to discuss this in the CSS the main CSS section of this course. The next one is the CSS Flexbox, and this layout ensures the elements have predictably behave predictably when the page layouts must accommodate different screen sizes. Like you have your different devices, like your phones, your tablets, your computer screens, all that. So what the CSS Flexbox does is it makes it a reliable way to display your layout on each of these screens. And we are gonna also talk about this in greater detail. The final one is a CSS grid, right? And the grid layout module offers a grid-based layout system, or like a grid with rows and columns, and you can make where you want to put your stuff based on that grid. And it's easier to design your web pages in this mode. So it's also without having to use your flows and your positioning, and that's a little messy, right? So we're going to discuss this also a little later down the course. So these are the four basic types that we are going to be looking at down. We are going to take an example, general example of this layout, general layout next. So let's start. Let's first have our doc type and have our HTML. Put in there your lang. And then the next thing to do, we have our head. And in the head, let's have a title. And the title of this is going to be our, uh, what are we doing now? Our layout. And then let's have a meta. Check our set. UTF-8. Let's have, um, do we need a style in here? We are going to have a style, but for now, let's just leave it empty. And then what else do we need over here? Okay, that's the end of a head. Let's go to the body. Okay, so in the body, we would want to design our body like we talked about. So I'm going to have, let's put a header, maybe H2, and say something like layouts in HTML, right? And then let's put a paragraph and say, uh, lorem, just need some data that I don't really need to type. So I'm gonna put another paragraph and put another content in there. Nice. And then I'm gonna have the header. Let's put a header, which is where you would want your header content to be. And in this header, I'm just gonna say H2, and I'm gonna say countries, right? And then I'm gonna have a section. We talked about sections. And in this section, let's say I have a navigation bar. And I'm in this navigation bar, we're gonna have an unordered list. And then what do we have in here? An li, and I know most of you can recall. And then we're going to have an anchor tag, href, and we just really want it to go nowhere. So I'm just going to put in a hash, and then just put in Ghana, and I'll just have a couple more. I'll put in the India, and then maybe a final one here. I'll put in here Portugal. Okay, so then we have our section, right? Uh, so we can also say, okay, let's have an article, right? Let's put an article section here under this section, article, and then have our H1, and then say Ghana, and then under this, can put another P, and content will be lorem. Okay, and what else do we need here? After the section, let's say a footer. Let's add a footer to this, right? So we add a footer, and then we would just want the footer to display a paragraph, and I'm just gonna say footer, right? So we have this. So if I refresh this, I have all this content, right? So I could have created another article for India and then for Portugal, right? So I'm just gonna leave it here, and then now as you can see, the layout just without having any styles in there, it just gives it to you like raw data, right? But we need to style this to give it the kind of feel and design that we would want. So I left the style block in your header empty, but now let's go back in there and let's just do a little bit of styling in here, right? And I'm just gonna go in here and I'm gonna say box styling, box sizing, sorry, should be border box, right? So if I refresh this, you don't see anything, but it's giving you that box sizing. And then, do you want to style the body? Yes. Let's say we want the body to have font family of Arial. Okay. So if I refresh this, we change all this to Arial, right? And then for the header, we want to style the header. Let's say we want the background color 666, right? So you can see the background color for this header is 666. So let's put in some padding, 20 pixels, some text align. Let's center this so everything is in the center. Let's change the font size to 30 pixels. And then we would change the color to white. Okay, so let's see how this is going to look like. Nice. So you have it bigger, more centered, and then it looks a little bit nicer. So now let's now style the nav, right? The navigation. So we are going to have um, we are going to create two columns or boxes that float next to each other. So more like uh, side by side, right? So we're going to have nav, and then we are going to say float to the left, right? And then give each one a width of 30%, 30% of the entire width. And then give it a height of 300 pixels. And then background should be, let's use CCC. And then we have some padding of 20 pixels. Okay, so that's the nav. Let's see. So now you have your box and then you have everything side by side. So that is going to be your navigation, right? We said float this nav to the left, give it 30%. So if you look at it, it's about 30% of your page. So you can see that you can fit almost three of this in here, which is about 90%, and you have a little bit left. So this is about 30%. You give it a height of 300 pixels, right? And a background color of like ash gray, right? And some padding in there. So that is what we just did. So now we can now go and actually style our ordered list, which is the ones in here, right? So we style this whole thing. So we can now target it. So we say style the list inside of this navigation. We go to nav, but not the nav. We are going to be styling the nav, the ULs that are in the nav, right? So if you look at this nav here, we have the UL, so that's why we make nav UL. So it's like it takes that. So now what do we want to do with this UL? We just want it to have a list style type, and then it should have none, right? And then padding of 0. Okay. So this will be enough for that. If I refresh this, it see the pattern has disappeared and it doesn't have the what do you call it? The style before the more like the icon before the names have just disappeared. So that's what we want. So that's what we did, right? So now we can look at the article itself. So let's target the article and then design it a little bit. We're gonna put article and then we're gonna design that. We're gonna say floats because we want it to float to the left. Okay, good. And then we're gonna have some padding, maybe 20 pixels, and then width of say 70%. And then we would have background. Let's change the background color. Background color of uh, let's say hash F1, 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 right? More like grayish, a little different. And then we are going to have a height of 300 pixels, right? So now if I refresh this, we have the section color coming up real nice. So what we can clear the floats after the columns. So let's do that. So we have, and I want you guys to just follow through. We are going to have a detailed section on CSS, and we'll be looking at all these other things that we don't understand. Right now, we just want to have a working example that shows what we want. So I'm just going to say after, and then style that, and I'm going to say content, and then empty, right? I'm going to say display table, and then clear both. Okay, so that's good. And then footer. Finally, let's do the footer, right? So right down here. So we come to the footer, and then we'll style this. Background color, maybe a little different. Let's put in there hash 777. Let's padding 10 pixels. Let's align the text in there. Text align. Do you want to center this? Yeah, let's center this. And then let's color the font color should be white. And then when I refresh this, I have my footer, right? So this is just an example of how we want to want to style our layout, right? So it depends, and we're going to look a little bit more into details when we get to the CSS section. But this is just something that I wanted to get out of the way, so you know that we can actually partition our page. How do we put stuff where we want it to go? How do we style those sections, those navs, those headers, the body? How do we just break everything down? And again, we are going to be looking at some other frameworks. It's a little down the either in this not in this course, but a different course if you want to learn about Bootstrap, because Bootstrap helps you to facilitate a lot of this stuff, right? So I'll see you in the next lesson. Thanks for watching. Bye.